fall 2007, and Colonel Greg Gadson is watching the New York Giants play on TV. Colonel Gadson has loved football since his childhood and played Division I in college before embarking on a career in the Army. But he's not watching the game from his house, or a base, or overseas. He's watching it from a bed at Walter Reed Hospital. Four months earlier, Colonel Gadson had been involved in an IED accident that led to the loss of both of his legs. The recovery had been tough, but one of the things that helped him was hearing from fellow soldiers and old football teammates.
One such teammate, Mike Sullivan, happened to be a coach for the New York Giants. And he said, was there anything else he could do? I said, well, when you guys come to town, I'd love to see you play. And he said, sure, no problem. So sure enough, third game of the season.
Sullivan kept that promise a few weeks later, but days before the game, he called Gadson for a favor.
He said, Greg, I don't know if you're following our progress, but we're not playing well. I'd like to know if you'd be willing to talk with the team. There's a teammate asking me to do something, and I said, sure.
Colonel Gadson wasn't quite sure what to say, though.
My wife is driving me to link up with the Giants, and she's asking me what I'm going to say. I got a blank 3x5 card in my hand. And
when he got to the locker room, he looked around, and he thought of his fellow soldiers who had done everything they could to keep him alive in the minutes and hours after the attack.
I told the story of being wounded and how my teammates came to my rescue. And I mean, just in a very matter-of-fact way. And I shared that with them. And ultimately, the Giants would win that game on a two-down goal line stand. They would go on an 11-game win streak.
That talk inspired the Giants players. And Colonel Gadson, who was still in recovery, became an honorary co-captain of the team.
And the night before the Super Bowl, after practice, I asked the coach if I could talk with the team. I told him if I could be anywhere else in the world right now, it would be back with my soldiers in Iraq. But I know that's not possible. But I told him that I would take every single one of them with me because I had watched you all become a team.
And the Giants win!
And so we won Super Bowl 42, and I was honored with the same ring the players got. And then just to make sure that no one thought it was a fluke, we did it again in Super Bowl 46.
On May 7th, 2002, Colonel Greg Gadson was returning from the memorial service of two soldiers in Iraq when he was a victim of an IED attack. His body was thrown into the air, and his fellow soldiers had to find him, resuscitate him, and get him to the hospital. He died 6 times that night, but doctors saved him. Months and years of grueling rehabilitation followed, but not once did Colonel Gadson lose faith, thanks to the help of his family, friends, teammates, football, and photography. In today's episode, our hosts sit down with Colonel Gadson to discuss how his love of football led to an exemplary 25-year Army career, how photography calms him, and how his relationship with the New York Giants led him to a new career as an actor. I'm Carrie Varuhaikis, and this is Army Matters.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lieutenant General Retired Leslie Smith, and I'm here today with my good battle buddy. Introduce yourself, sir.
Well, hey, Les. Thanks for bringing me on the show with you today. Good to always be here with you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I know.
I'm Dan Dailey. I'm the co-host with the 66th Inspector General.
That's right. We have a lot of fun. And today, I got some questions to ask you. Can I go first this time?
Sure, why not?
So Dan, are you a fan of football? Did you play football growing up?
Not on a team. I played basketball, but I played, my friends, every day. I'd love to play football. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I played it at high school level.
Oh, wait. Let's break that down just quick. What position did you play? What position?
I was actually a defensive end and a free safety.
Wow.
An okay athlete. I grew into myself later.
Yeah.
I think it's all those pull-up and push-ups that helped me grow.
Well, you're not a small guy. You must have hurt some people out on the field there. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I would say I'm a late bloomer. Like you an early bloomer. I'm a late bloomer.
I don't know if I had to
figure out. Yeah. You haven't bloomed yet?
No.
Are you still blooming? So. What?
I don't know if I'm gonna bloom.
Okay.
So our guest today, you actually have a personal connection, right?
Sometimes you meet people and immediately there's a connection.
Yeah.
And that's the case with our guest today. And the first time I met him, I think it was at Fort Belvoir at some event. And so everyone gathers around him. And then once you start talking to him and you hear his story, you're like, wow. And you've gone through this and you're still this way. He's an affable, likable guy. In the National Capital Region, we go to a lot of different things. And if I was there, he was there. If he was there, I was there. I was like, Greg, are you following me? And then so we just developed a friendship from there.
Sounds like a guy with a lot of humility and he really cares.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. Why don't you introduce our guest? Since you have a personal connection.
Sure.
Why don't you bring him on the show?
Today's guest started out their career loving football. And he actually played at the college level. But he chose to join the Army instead. And he's had an inspiring career, both in uniform and outside of uniform. Colonel Retired Greg Gadson, welcome to Army Matters.
What an honor and pleasure it is to be here with you all.
Now, Greg, before we get into football, your Army career, and everything else, I want to talk about something else, something that you're really passionate about, photography. Can you tell us how you got into it?
Photography has actually been one of my lifelong passions. Buried underneath this facade or this exterior of football player, soldier.
Don't give it all out yet. Come on, just a little at a time. Just a little bit.
I am a photographer at heart.
Okay.
In fact, one of the things that I thought about being when I grew up after I retired, if I didn't, get wounded, was to literally be a photojournalist.
Okay.
I love to travel and I love to, people write, people speak, they communicate in all sorts of ways. And photography is that medium for me.
Now, Greg, did you take any photos while you were deployed?
I actually got honorable mention in a Department of Defense photo contest as a second lieutenant for a picture I took during the first Gulf War. And then I took pictures in Afghanistan. I took some in Iraq. I took pictures in all my deployments.
So what was the photo that you won for?
It was a picture that I took during the ground war, and we were in an occupied position and we were shooting. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with an 8-inch artillery piece. I know General Smith's probably seen them, but it's just an angry beast of a gun. So I caught a nice action shot of an artillery piece in action, and I called the photo "Reach Out and Touch Someone." If you remember the AT&T commercials back then, that's where I kind of borrowed the phrase.
Well, Greg, over the years, you've been able to reach out and inspire a lot of soldiers. And I'd love to get into that by starting at the very beginning. Tell us how you began your journey at West Point.
So I had it all figured out. I was going to get a Division I scholarship and play football for 4 years in college. And then I was going to get drafted. And I was ultimately going to be part of a championship team.
Okay.
I did very well. In fact, University of Virginia had offered me a scholarship, and my plan was coming together. And then at the last possible minute, they had other plans. And I was devastated. I was infuriated. I was all the above. And I didn't have a place to go. And a football recruiter named Ted Gill had come to my high school, not to recruit me, but a classmate, a teammate of mine named Tracy Branch, and my coach, John Dukes, suggested that they take a look at me, and I was the bonus. I was the strap hanger on an official visit up to West Point, and I didn't know what West Point was.
Okay.
I heard of the Army-Navy game, but I never made that connection. So anyway, I simply asked, do they play Division I football? And they said, yep. That was all I needed to hear. And I would just figure out the rest.
Okay. You know, you play football. You played all 4 years at West Point?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what position did you play?
I was a very undersized outside linebacker, you know, in 2-point stance, 5'11" and a half. 195 pounds.
Oh, wow.
You know, taking on primarily tight ends and sometimes offensive tackles.
Yeah. Wow. So, Greg, while at West Point, you studied Arabic, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
We didn't have exactly formal majors, as you think, but my field of study was Middle Eastern history. And I took a couple years of Arabic as well.
Okay. And so you used to get help from a particular specialist? Who was that specialist? I think I know this story, but I want everybody to hear it.
I had a classmate, Kim Thomas, that I had some feelings for. And she happened to be taking Arabic, but she was 1 year behind. And, you know, there weren't a lot of Arabic speakers. And I talked her into helping me practice my Arabic. And I told her that I liked her in Arabic.
Okay.
And do you know that she got up and walked out of the room, and
no, she did.
And us never to speak again for almost an entire year.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Dan, you notice he's stumbling all over this, but go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't think I was stumbling. Well, you know,
we're running this, man. Okay.
A year later, with the assistance of her roommate, they talked me into going out to a movie, and lo and behold, my recruited Arabic tutor was my future bride. So I like to say that she saw the light.
She felt sorry for you.
The story's a little bit different if we had her on the show.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have her on and give her. Yeah, we could do that. On the splice that into give her viewpoint.
No. I think that's pretty clear.
You did?
Yeah.
Is that pretty accurate? Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, Greg, you originally thought that you were going to be a 5-and-fly guy.
Yep.
Do your time, go home. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Why did you change your mind along the way?
So I had never imagined myself as a career Army officer, and I had a motto of 5-and-fly. I was going to do my 5 years and then move on to something else, presumably that had to do with football. I wanted to be a coach, and I loved history. I imagined myself as a high school history teacher and a football coach. And I'm now in my second assignment after going to the advanced course. I'm stationed at then Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, and I'm assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division Artillery. My first assignment, I was in a Corps Support Heavy Artillery unit. I was in an 8-inch artillery battalion.
Oh, my gosh.
And I am now in the 82nd Airborne Division in a light artillery battalion. You couldn't have any more stark experiences.
Yeah.
And I remember getting there just thinking, these people are nuts. I say the long story short is through some great mentors like Major General retired Rodney Anderson and General Larry Gottardi and so many super paratroopers, I fell in love with soldiering.
So, Greg, your life changed forever on May of 2007. Can you tell our listeners about that day?
I'd say the irony of that evening was that I was heading back to my headquarters after attending a memorial service for 2 soldiers that were killed by an IED a few days earlier in a sister battalion from Fort Riley. First Lieutenant Ryan Jones and Specialist Sunson were killed. And I think the thing that I will always kind of remember about that night was that I was just personally introspective about, you know, the sacrifice of these young men and their families and whether or not we were making a difference over there. It just, in May and that time in 2007 in Iraq, it seemed that every day a U.S. service member was paid in full measure. And so I'm in a 4-vehicle patrol heading back to my base, and that's when I got hit. And
Where were you serving in Iraq at that time, Greg?
I was in Baghdad. You remember the surge brigades that President Bush directed, and I think I was in the second. So we got up there pretty early, and it was still violent. I was working in kind of western Baghdad. My battle space were these two areas that paralleled Route Irish called Hattin and Yarmouk, just north of it. And I was hit in an area that was just south of my AO because the memorial service had been on Fob Falcon.
Route Irish that Greg mentioned was one of the most dangerous routes in Iraq and that whole area. And you're right. I was there in 07, 09. And a very, very dangerous time. There was a Sunni Shia uprising, almost a civil war going on between the two religious factions there, and day-to-day contact with the enemy. So, and Greg, what happened as a result when that IED hit your vehicle?
The blast, it actually blew me out of my vehicle. So I was not to be immediately found when my vehicle stopped. First Sergeant Frederick Johnson, who was at the time my acting command sergeant major, he was the one that identified that I was missing and ultimately located me and began to resuscitating me. And a young chemical soldier by MOS, Eric Brown, would put the tourniquets on my legs. Ultimately, the doctors that evening give him credit for saving my life. Long story short is that ultimately I would lose both my legs. Not right away. I in fact went through 129 pints of blood that night, Sergeant Major, and died 6 times. I would lose my legs once I got back to the States, and then began recovering and trying to figure out life as a double above the knee amputee.
You talked about you died 6 times. You lost so much blood, but you said that, God, please don't let me die. How can you describe that to our listeners and the thoughts and feelings you were going through at that time?
I knew it was an IED, and I'd been in a minor one before. And so you just,
Yeah.
And so it's got to be in a matter of seconds, but you go from being hot and pissed off to recognizing that, hey, I am hurt and I'm seriously hurt and this is not good, because I couldn't move. And how do you measure your spiritual strength? How do you know how strong your faith is? I don't know. I don't know how to measure it. But Sergeant Major, I know it was strong enough for me for my last thoughts, my last prayer, to ask God to save me. That was where my last thoughts was, God, I do not want to die here.
And Greg, you mentioned you went through a long recovery, and you when you came back to the States, you lost your legs.
Yep.
What was your darkest moment during that recovery? What was your biggest challenge during that period?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is you're a father, you're a husband, you're a soldier, and for a minute, all of that is unsettled. And what I say is that my life was a blank slate. I did not know, and I didn't have any confidence about even what my expectations were going to be, what my dreams should be. Those things made it difficult to want to engage, to want to participate, to want to go on.
Did you know, as a member of AUSA, you have access to many benefits? From car rental to entertainment discounts, the opportunities are ample. Visit ausa.org/benefits to learn more.
Welcome back to Army Matters. Now, Greg, can you tell us about the role your family played in your recovery?
Well, my family was undoubtedly the backbone of the thinking about just getting back and whether I ever would see him again. Being in that moment where you don't know. And then their unconditional love. My kids were 13 and 14, so my son was in the 7th grade and my daughter was in the 9th grade.
Mm-hmm.
They were plucked out of school because school wasn't even out.
Mm-hmm.
Their lives turned upside down. We talk about our Army credentials being our families. We don't take it for granted, but I will tell you, America does, because America, they don't know what we do, and they don't know what our families are asked to do, and they'll never have an appreciation of it. But to have families, whether peace or wartime, have to deal with those kinds of things is you're asking a lot.
Yeah.
I was in a position, honestly, that I couldn't do a thing for myself. Our military did not have caregivers. Our military did not have rehab facilities. Because why? We got rid of them after Vietnam because we said we'd never get involved in counterinsurgencies. Guess what? We got not one, but two.
Mm-hmm.
And so our country asked our families to stop what they're doing and take care of people like me. My family's unconditional love, they didn't treat me any differently. I was still dad. I was still a husband. And my kids didn't try to hide me. They didn't try to not be seen in public with me because I couldn't do a thing for myself. That was incredibly supporting because it allowed me to focus on my recovery. I wasn't worried about losing my family. I could focus on what my task at hand, and that was healing.
Mm-hmm.
And they had my back.
Yeah. It's a tough challenge, right? I mean, so of course I didn't go through that, but having to deal with a lot of the combat wounded soldiers, it's a big life shift. You gotta go in a different direction. And you've done an incredible one, and Les is going to talk about that. But before I hand it over to Les, you decided to continue to be a soldier, even despite the incredible tragedy you went through. But the Army determined you to be unfit to serve. How and why did you fight that?
I think before I even knew about the mechanics of what I needed to do, as I started to take inventory of myself, I said I was still a soldier. And I didn't think of myself any other way. I was lieutenant colonel, and my rhetorical question was, the Army wasn't paying me for how fast I could run. My value, I felt, was, what was here in my heart and what was in my head. And so first it was, oh, you're going to be medically retired. And then next it was, oh, we're going to ship you off to up to West Point, and you can be an instructor. And I was like, no, that's not me. And I said, I'll do anything, but I'm a soldier. And I refuse to let anyone define me other than that.
Yeah. Now, we already heard about the story of you earning not one, but 2 Super Bowl rings for helping the New York Giants. But I think that affiliation also led to another career for you, acting. Now, how do you go from winning Super Bowl rings to acting?
Sir, it's a continued line of blessings. Peter Berg, the director of the movie, a New Yorker and a lifelong New York Giants fan, and whose father was a Marine, called me up while I was doing my War College Fellowship at the Institute of World Politics, and asked me if I would be in the movie. And my attitude in life was, what do I got to lose? So I just took it on, and it kind of worked out pretty good.
The movie is called Battleship. It's in 2012. Every now and then when I want to get fired up, I watch it, and I see Greg in there doing this thing. And so you've done other acting parts before too, haven't you?
Yep. I got to work briefly with Denzel Washington and A Journal for Jordan. And then I was in this educational series called The Inspectors. I did 10 episodes of that. And this past season, I did a couple episodes of NCIS Los Angeles.
So Dan, have you been on NCIS Los Angeles before?
I have not. I'm getting amazed here. NCIS.
We need to get an autograph. Send us an autograph. But this is what we're going to talk about. So you've also, now you're an author.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your book? Waypoints, A Warrior's Journey Toward Peace and Purpose.
So I go real lightly on the author part. I'm a co-author.
Sure.
Therese Slaughter. I give the undying line support for putting together the book. It's named Waypoints because life is about the journey, not the destination. And our waypoints, the waypoints lay out our journey. It's just and obviously it's a military navigational term, really particular to my branch as a red leg, as an artilleryman, because you got to hit your waypoints. And so what I think, to me, what it does is it reiterates that we have to live our life. We have to be where we're at. I say doing the small stuff. There are no big things in life. Big things are just a bunch of small things. And if you do the small things right, the big things take care of themselves. And just staying focused and living and being where you're at.
Greg, I'll tell you what, it has been an absolute honor and privilege to be able to spend some time with you today, to share the same uniform as a gentleman like you have worn, and to hear your words and your inspiration is just incredible. So thanks for coming on the show with us today.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. It's an honor. It's an honor to be here on Army Matters.
Last October, I roamed the busy exhibit halls of AUSA's annual meeting and spoke with a number of attendees, many of whom gave shout-outs to members of the Army family that have made an impact on their lives. Here's one of them.
My name's Matt Stern. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel. I'm from Illinois. That's where I grew up. I now live in Virginia. I retired here in 2008. My shout-out would be to retired Major General John Davis, who was my commander and the bestest Army officer I ever served with. I think it's kind of humorous. I hadn't watched The Office ever. And one day I came into work and he said, "Hey, Matt, have you watched The Office?" And I said, "No, sir, I haven't." And he said, "Well, my inspiration to be a great leader, it comes from Michael Scott." And so I went home and I watched it, and I couldn't watch an episode because it's so the opposite of who he really is, everything about him. He is the epitome of a military professional and an officer, and it just inspired me every day.
If you would like to give a shout out to someone in the Army family, leave us a voicemail at 703-236-2914 or email a voice note to podcast@ausa.org.
To all our listeners, thanks for joining us. Army Matters is brought to you by the Association of the United States Army, the U.S. Army's professional association, member-supported, Army-connected. Visit us at ausa.org for more information or to become a member. Your membership helps AUSA continue to carry out its mission, educate, inform, and connect with the total Army, our industry partners, and supporters of a strong national defense. Today's episode was hosted by Lieutenant General Retired Les Smith and SMA Retired Dan Dailey, and anchor hosted by Carrie Barrow-Heckes. Anthony Del Call is the producer and writer, and Andy Bosnack is the supervising sound editor. Ellen Toner is the content editor. Unzinga Curry is the executive producer, and the senior producers are Carrie Barrow-Heckes and LaSharon Duncan. Be sure to subscribe to Army Matters wherever you get your podcasts, and please leave a review. As you know, we love seeing stars in the Army, especially if it comes in the form of a 5-star review. AUSA's Army Matters podcast can also be heard on Reach Across America Radio on Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, on the iHeartRadio app, the Odyssey app, and the TuneIn app with the search of the word Reef. AUSA's Army Matters podcast primary purpose is to entertain. The podcast does not constitute advice or services. While guests are invited to listen, listeners, please note that you're not being provided professional advice from the podcast or the guest. The views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect the views of AUSA. For questions or to provide topic recommendations, email us at podcast@ausa.org. I'm Sharon Duncan. Hope you have a great Army Day. Hooah!